You understand?
Who originally instituted slavery.
Right. Well, a family in that lineage, right? Now, Columbus, of course, we can get into him in more depth. The other statue, though, is Queen Victoria. Now, Queen Victoria is in my opinion, she is the most undeserving sort of historical character that's viewed in this benevolent light, right? So usually when you hear about Queen Victoria, they talk about, oh, her husband died at a very young age and she wore black to commemorate her husband. When you dive into it, you can see that she had many affairs throughout her life. So obviously she wasn't so hell-bent on this man. But right. Aside from her personal things, I don't want to get into that. This woman, I don't think anybody in human history has benefited more from the death and destruction on the continent of Africa and from colonization. And she physically met with African leaders like Chetshwayo from the Zulu clan, just to name one. And she pretty much decimated them. She did something called the Punitive Expedition, and she is the one that oversaw the scramble for Africa. She oversaw Cecil John Rhodes, who killed over 100 million Africans trying to march the Cape in South Africa with Cairo and Egypt. And she was the major beneficiary of all of this. She was the one that oversaw Leopold getting the Congo. She was the strongest person that was at the Berlin conference and the Brussels conference.
So she ultimately petitioned and kept him in power so that he could do what he can do.
Yeah, well, Henry Morgan Stanley, he was the one that was sent there to map out the Congo region on behalf of all these European powers. See, these European people have to understand, and it hasn't changed today, it has always been a concerted effort by these European powers to degrade African people. And we don't actually acknowledge certain parts of the history because it's not highlighted, of course, and we just don't know about it. And if we knew about these things, on a global scale, every person of African descent, we would walk into any political arena with our chin up. If you catch my drift, we understand.
I'm having right now, too, that most people are not aware of. I can't thank you enough for pointing that out. It's that most people are not aware. They think that this racism and slavery and all of these issues that took place with Columbus are dead. But that's not true. Yeah. The issues the things that they have done and the issues that they have put in place are now continuously causing Bahamian people problems centuries later into the future by the racist policies, the slavery, and the things that they've done in the past are now ultimately shaping the future in the Bahamas now.
Right. So let me make some parallels about the ways that racism manifests in the United States and in the Bahamas. See, in the United States, you have subtle racism and overt racism. A lot of people think, especially even black people, think that racism is that guy wearing the KKK hood. You understand? The white person that would literally come out and call you the N-word. People see racism as that. Some people don't see a white person come and asking to touch your hair because they think it's exotic. Right. It's also being racist, you understand? And then you have many different subtle differences. Now, my argument is viewed as quite controversial here in the Bahamas because, of course, everyone knows that America is pretty much the poster child, especially today, of racism. However, there are certain ways that racism manifests in different areas given their history. And in the Bahamas, in some ways, the Bahamas is actually more racist.
Is it?
Yeah, than America is. You understand? One of the ways that it has to do a lot with population proportions as well. But however, in America, even in a place like Brazil, you go to the favela in Brazil, or you go to the quote-unquote ghetto in America, you will see a diverse group of people living in poor, gentrified areas. You understand what I'm saying? In the Bahamas, you will not see that. You do not see white people and black people as you see in a Brazilian favela, as you see in, say, certain places in the United States, because you have the ghetto and you also have the trailer park, stereotypically speaking. You understand? And our quote-unquote poor whites, relative to the other whites, they live in middle-class communities. And when you look at the ultra-rich areas, because we have a lot of wealthy blacks, again, because of our proportion and because of our freedom fighters that, of course, came before us and made certain sacrifices, made certain political maneuvers in order for this to happen as well. I'm not negating that. However, when you look at an area, for example, like Lyford Key, and then you look at another area like, say, West Ridge Estates, an area where black people live, Even though they're both wealthy areas, the properties in Life Key, some of them exceed $20 million. This is where celebrities from Hollywood and stuff like that live. Now, Life Key, where did it get its name? It got its name from a man named John Lightfoot. That was supposed to be, well, he is the slave master. Now, in the Bahamas, another thing that we were able to attain, a positive stride, if you will, is we have this thing called generation property. So there's like this kind of unspoken known rule that if your ancestors were enslaved somewhere, you understand, essentially, you have rights to that land. You understand, that's your land, and all those who could trace their roots back to specific plantations. But when you look at all of the prime areas in the Bahamas, you go to what we call the family islands, the outer islands, my island where only 1,200 people live, and you go and you drive around, you see two things that exudes blatant racism, and it's rooted in blatant racism. One thing that you would see is you would see a lot of these major real estate companies, most of which are white owned. You understand? I don't even know if I can call their names to get, because they can get vicious when they're ready. But
right.
They know exactly which companies they're talking about, and they know exactly who own them. The people who own them, many of these people could trace their roots. Some of them you could trace their wealth back to slavery. Some of them you could trace them back to our equivalent of the Reconstruction era, our equivalent of the Jim Crow era, which is where we had something called the truck and credit system that operated very similarly, with some differences to the American sharecropper system. You understand what I'm saying? So all of these families still to this day control the Bahamas, and they own all of these prime properties in the family islands that used to be plantations.